Smoke rolled through the prison like a dark cloud. From the tall tower at Strangeways Prison, a man waved a shirt tied to a broom handle. Below him, alarms screamed. Sirens wailed outside the walls. Prison officers pulled back as bricks, wood, and broken metal rained down from above. The prison was no longer under control. Men shouted from windows. Doors were smashed. Fires burned in places no fire should ever burn. For the first time, the world could see what was happening inside one of Britain's most feared prisons. This was the riot that exposed Britain's prison crisis. And as police lines formed outside and helicopters hovered above, one question echoed through the smoke. If this prison could explode once, could it happen again? Years later, the walls still stood. The prison was renamed, repaired, and guarded more tightly than before. Many people believed the problem was solved. The riot was history. A lesson learned. But inside Strangeways, the tension never fully left. Daniel Walker arrived on a cold evening. He had been transferred from Manchester after causing trouble in another prison. He was not alone. In the weeks before him, inmates from Liverpool and Leeds had also been moved in. Officials said it was routine. Inside the prison, it felt like something else. Strangeways was old. Older than most prisons in Britain. The walls were thick. The corridors were narrow. The cells felt like they were built for another century. Daniel noticed the silence first. Not peaceful silence. Heavy silence. The kind that presses on your chest. "Keep your head down," a man whispered as Daniel passed his cell. "This place remembers." Daniel did not understand what he meant. Life inside Strangeways moved slow. Doors opened late. Food arrived cold. Yard time was short and often cancelled. Men waited. And waited. And waited some more. Stories moved faster than time. Men talked about the riot like it was yesterday. How prisoners climbed the tower. How officers lost control. How the world watched live on TV. "They fixed the walls," an older inmate said. But not the reason it happened. Daniel listened. Transfers from Manchester, Liverpool, and Leeds filled the wings. Different cities. Different gangs. Old grudges followed them inside. Officers tried to keep them apart, but space was tight. Pressure built quietly. One night, the lights flickered. Not off. Just enough to notice. The next day, the phones were shut down without warning. No calls. No explanation. Food portions shrank. Showers were limited. Lockdowns lasted longer. Men began to argue. Small things. A look. A word. A place in line. Daniel felt it in the air. Like a storm you could smell before it came. Then came the unexplained disturbances. A door found smashed overnight. A fire alarm pulled with no fire. A fight that ended before officers arrived. Each time, the prison tightened control. More searches. More lockdowns. Less movement. It reminded older inmates of something they had seen before. The riot didn't start in one day, a man from Liverpool told Daniel quietly. It started like this. One evening, during dinner, an argument broke out between two men from different cities. Officers stepped in fast. Too fast. One man was taken away. The wing went silent. The next morning, his cell was empty. That same day, officers announced a full wing lockdown. No yard. No programs. No end time. Daniel sat on his bed and stared at the door. He thought about the tower. About the smoke. About men shouting to be heard. Strangeways had exploded once because no one listened. That night, Daniel heard banging echo through the prison. Not just one cell. Many. The sound spread. Metal on metal. Voices rising. Then someone shouted a word that made Daniel's blood run cold. Riot. The alarms began to scream again. And deep inside Strangeways Prison, the past started knocking on the present. The alarms did not stop. They screamed through the walls, through the floors, through the bones of the prison. Daniel stood in his cell as the red light above the door flashed again and again. Somewhere down the wing, men were shouting. Not all together. Not organized. Just loud fear and loud anger mixing into one sound. "Get down," an officer shouted from the corridor. Daniel dropped to the floor. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He pressed his cheek against the cold concrete and listened. Boots ran past. Keys rattled. A door slammed shut so hard the wall shook. Then another sound joined the chaos. Banging. Not one cell. Many. Metal fists hitting metal doors. Over and over. Like a heartbeat spreading through the prison. "This is how it starts," a voice yelled from somewhere nearby. This is how it started last time. Daniel thought about the stories. The old riot. Men climbing the tower. Smoke over Manchester. Officers losing control. Inside Strangeways Prison, the past felt very close. After what felt like hours, the alarms stopped. The lights stayed on. Officers moved slowly now, shouting orders. Lockdown remains in place. Doors stayed shut. No one was allowed out. Dinner never came. Daniel lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His stomach growled. His mouth felt dry. He tried to sleep, but every small sound made him jump. Morning came without relief. Still no yard. No phones. No showers. The prison felt frozen in time. Men shouted questions through their doors. What's going on? How long? Why are we locked down? No answers came. By the second day, tempers flared. Men from Manchester argued with men from Liverpool. Men from Leeds blamed everyone. Old street problems followed them into the narrow corridors. Daniel heard a fight break out 2 cells away. Officers arrived fast. Someone screamed. Then silence again. The cell next to Daniel went empty. Food finally arrived late that night. Cold. Small. Thrown through the slot like it did not matter. Daniel ate fast, afraid it would be taken away. An older inmate shouted down the wing, "They're doing the same things they did before the riot." No one told him to shut up. On the third day, officers announced controlled movement. 1 cell at a time. No talking. No stopping. Daniel stepped into the corridor and felt the tension in the air. Men stared at each other but said nothing. Officers stood between groups, hands ready. In the yard, Daniel saw it clearly for the first time. The prison was packed. Too many men. Too little space. Too much waiting. A man from Liverpool laughed suddenly. Not happy. Angry. "They fixed the walls," he said loudly. "But they left us in here like this." An officer ordered him back. That afternoon, rumors spread fast. Someone said officers were hurt. Someone said transfers were coming. Someone said the tower had been locked for a reason. That night, the lights flickered. Daniel sat up. Then the shouting began again. Louder than before. Closer. Doors banged. Someone pulled a fire alarm. Smoke drifted into the corridor. Real smoke. Men began to chant. Not words. Just noise. A roar. Daniel stood in his cell as the sound grew, heart racing, knowing this was bigger than before. Then a crash echoed from the far end of the wing. A heavy crash. Like a door giving way. And Daniel realized the unrest was no longer just tension. It was turning into something Strangeways had not seen in years. The crash was followed by shouting. Not one voice. Many. Daniel stepped back from his door as smoke crept along the floor outside his cell. The air smelled sharp and burned his nose. Somewhere nearby, a fire alarm screamed, louder than all the others before it. "This is it," someone yelled. They didn't fix anything. Inside Strangeways Prison, control was slipping again. Officers ran past Daniel's door. Their voices were louder now. Faster. Orders overlapped. The calm tone that usually filled the prison was gone. In its place was urgency. "Stay in your cells," an officer shouted. But not everyone listened. Daniel heard doors banging harder than before. Metal struck metal. Someone kicked a door again and again until the sound changed, lower and broken. Men shouted from different wings, their voices bouncing off the old walls. The past was no longer a memory. It was happening again. From his small window, Daniel saw smoke rising into the open space above the wing. Lights flickered. Shadows moved fast across the walls. The prison felt alive in the worst way. Older inmates began shouting warnings. "Back to your cells. This is how people get hurt." But fear was louder than sense. A group of inmates from different cities began arguing through the noise. Manchester against Liverpool. Liverpool against Leeds. Old anger mixed with new frustration. Years of waiting, being locked down, being ignored, all poured out at once. Then came the sirens. Not the prison alarms. Police sirens. Outside the walls, blue lights flashed against the grey stone. Daniel could hear helicopters above, chopping the air. The sound made his stomach drop. Just like before. Officers pushed back down the corridor, forming lines. Shields came out. Orders were shouted again, stronger this time. On the floor. Now. Daniel obeyed. He lay flat, heart racing, feeling the vibration of boots running past him. He pressed his face to the floor and waited. Minutes felt like hours. Slowly, the noise began to change. Less shouting. More commands. The smoke thinned. The fire alarms stopped one by one. Finally, the loudspeaker crackled. All inmates remain in cells. The situation is under control. Daniel stayed where he was until an officer told him to stand. When he looked out, the corridor was different. Marks on the walls. A broken door down the wing. The smell of smoke still hanging in the air. Someone had been taken away on a stretcher. Daniel did not see who. The prison went into full lockdown. Days passed with no yard. No phones. Food came late and small. Men spoke only in whispers now. But something had changed. The fear was no longer only inside the cells. Inspectors arrived weeks later. Officials walked the wings, taking notes. Asking questions. Looking at doors. Looking at numbers. Inmates talked quietly about what had happened. About overcrowding. About waiting. About how the same problems from years ago were still there, just hidden better. Daniel sat on his bed one night and thought about the tower. About smoke over Manchester. About men shouting to be heard. The riot at Strangeways had once exposed Britain's prison crisis to the world. What happened now showed something else. The crisis had never really ended. It had just been waiting.